This is our post-game analysis of birthing our very first child, our baby boy, Athanasius. And we wanted to put this video together to share our birthing experience. For anybody who's about to become a parent, maybe we can give some insight into your lives and into the experience that you're about to go through. And if you're thinking about having kids, then this might be helpful for you. And if you've already had kids, then this might just be funny for you. So we're about 4 days into it now, hanging on to our sanity. The due date for our son was the 20th of October, and he didn't come on that day, nor did he come that entire week. Taylor was booked in to go to the hospital to sort of see what they could do to get him to come along a bit faster.
Yeah, so they wanted to do a membrane sweep to try and get labour going, because he was in there already for a week and he was getting close to being overdue. So I went in and they tried doing the membrane sweep, but the cervix hadn't yet effaced properly, I don't think. So she could touch his head, but she couldn't go all the way around. They told me that because of my low blood platelet count, they wanted to induce me the next morning, which is not what we were expecting. They booked us in at 7:30 in the morning to come into the hospital, and then they'd start me on syntocinon, which is like synthetic oxytocin, and that'll bring on contractions. I didn't really want to be induced because syntocinon makes contractions very intense and brings them on very quickly without there being breaks in between. And that was something that I wanted to avoid, especially because we were hoping to go for a natural birth.
When Taylor told me that they wanted to induce her on Tuesday morning, I thought maybe we should seek a second opinion, because we had heard a lot of negative things about what happens when you get induced, in terms of being able to bond with the child and also the health of the mother during birth. We contacted a couple of people, and we got told that labour-inducing acupuncture would be a good idea to naturally bring labour on a little bit quicker.
It's when they put needles in specific points on your body. So I think she put them on my lower back, and then on your shoulders, on this part of your hand here, because that causes contractions, and then on the balls of your feet, and then on the inside of your ankles. Those are all the pressure points that can start labour off pretty quickly. It was like a last minute decision to call a acupuncture place in Brisbane that was specifically for fertility and pregnancy, and I was able to book an appointment. I told Chris, and then I drove in, and as I was driving I started getting some slight contractions. They weren't intense, but it was hard to concentrate on being relaxed and calm during them and driving at the same time. If the acupuncture worked and they got even more strong, then Chris would have to be there, because there's no way I'd be able to drive home, even if I didn't go into labour straight away.
I called a friend, and it so turned out that the first friend that I called was actually able to take me into the city and drop me outside the building where Taylor was. So I went and parked outside his apartment building. He dropped me in there. That took like 15 minutes. And after waiting in the acupuncture place, then Taylor came out, and she seemed pretty calm. And then what happened?
Well, so I came out, and I think I was putting on my shoes when this water like came out of me, and I was really surprised because like it was my waters had broken, and from all the birthing stories I had heard, usually the woman feels like a popping sensation within the uterus, but I didn't feel anything like that at all. And all of a sudden this water just like dripped out of me, and I had no control over it. The lady in charge of the place, like, she seemed a bit shell-shocked, because even though she worked with inducing labour with acupuncture, she had never actually had waters break in her practice before. So she rushed off and she got us some towels. We managed to dry up the floor, which I had a couple of puddles on the inside of my shoes. And then I quickly ran to the bathroom to clean myself up, and she gave us a really nice towel to take with us. When the water came out, we noticed that it was brown. So because it was brown, it was a possible sign of the baby having done his first poo in the womb. So we had to rush to the hospital.
Full marks to labour-inducing acupuncture. You guys did your job. We parked in a big car park and had to walk up and down a hill, and every couple of minutes we had to stop because Taylor was getting contractions, and I was just really hoping and praying that she wouldn't get a contraction in the middle of a pedestrian crossing because there were a lot of cars coming as well. We went inside the hospital, said that she was in labour, and they took us to the labour assessment room.
Yeah. They asked what colour the water was, and because we said it was brown, they wanted to double check and make sure, because that meant that they would have to get the baby out within the next 24 hours. They got a sample of the waters, and because it was brown, they started monitoring the contractions and the baby's heart rate to make sure he was okay. I think within a couple of minutes we were admitted into a birthing room.
So how are you feeling at this point?
I felt excited, yeah, because things were happening, and I thought that meant that, we didn't have to be induced and we could do things the way we wanted to.
I was excited, but at the same point, we've gone through a whole course on hypnobirthing, and we came in with all these sheets with our birth plan, and I had this birth partner sheet of how I was supposed to intervene when they weren't doing things the way that we had decided we wanted them done. We did not take those pieces of paper out once. He had done a poop in the womb, and that seemed to just blow all our plans to smithereens. I felt like I was really on the back foot at this point, but the midwives were really lovely and they were super on top of what was happening. So at that point, I felt like I had to take up the position of purely emotional support, because if I tried to intervene and be like, I need the lights dimmer, or I need to make sure that you don't all come rushing in the room at a certain point because we need to keep it relaxed in here, then they would give me 1,000 medical reasons why my reason wasn't good enough. And so I thought, okay, I'm totally out of my depth here. So that course was useful, but if you're going to go into your birthing experience with plans, but be prepared for those plans to just become obsolete and learn how to cope on the fly, I think.
So we planned to have a water birth and to birth naturally without any pain relief.
No episiotomies.
Yeah, if it was to tear, for things just to happen naturally and not be forced on by the doctor. That's what we had planned.
So you were having gap and then 2 intense contractions and then a gap, and it was kind of all over the place.
Yeah, and they were like, we need them to be more regular and to get stronger, and that's not happening for labour to progress, so we have to give you this Syntocinon. And at first they were okay, and we had an exercise ball that I could sit on, and I was able to sort of breathe through the contractions, and Chris was really good as well with supporting me and allowing me to lean on him and stuff. The contractions got closer together and even more intense than we anticipated, I guess. Eventually it started feeling like I just couldn't manage it properly. My body felt like it needed to push, and I was only at 8 centimeters. I asked for the gas because I wanted to try and, epidural was the last resort. I didn't want to go to that. And that worked for a bit, for 3 contractions. And then they started getting even more intense. So they offered morphine. I agreed to take that. Eventually, I had to ask for the epidural, even though I really didn't want it, because I just couldn't deal.
I was freaking out because you were making noises that I had never heard you make before in my life, and gripping my hand much stronger than I'd ever felt you grip my hand before. So although I was kind of really skeptical about her taking the epidural, I thought, okay, if it's going to give her some relief, it's going to give her a bit of time to rest before that actual final push that happens when the baby's delivered. The midwives are strongly recommending it. I clearly don't know what I'm doing. So this is probably a good idea.
Yeah, so they called the
anaesthetist.
in. By this point, I was like zoning out and could barely concentrate on what anyone was saying.
She was tripping.
Yeah.
Tripping hard.
And the contractions were coming on so close together that every time someone asked if they could do something, or if, you know, did I want this or that, or like, here's an update on the baby, I'd have to be like, hold on a second, just wait while I
Contract.
work through this. So the anaesthetist came in and he was like, oh, they called him in and he took a while to come in as well because he was in the theatre room or something.
Yeah.
And I was thinking to myself, when on earth is this guy gonna come in, because I just can't deal with this anymore. Every couple of hours his heart rate would drop, and then like a billion doctors would rush into the room to try and move me around and get me to lie on one side and then the other side so that his heartbeat would pick up. And they were like, by the third time they came in, they were like, if this happens again, we have to do a C-section. The anaesthetist came in. Oh my gosh, that was so hard. I don't think I heard anything.
So he starts reading all this paperwork with all these technical terms in it, and he's like, do you understand that this could happen and that could happen, and what you're going to have to do is bend your spine at a particular angle so that your vertebrae can separate enough so that we can fit the needle in that space, and you have to do it that way, and you have to make sure that you keep still enough. We're going to paint your back in this purple substance, are you okay with that? And we're going to put a cape on you, and then there's going to be a needle, and then there's going to be a cannula? Catheter. A cannula. So he's going through this whole protocol, and I could tell that Taylor could not understand any of it.
I was just like zoning out. My eyes were closing and I couldn't concentrate, and like he'd stop and be like, are you with me? Are you with me?
Stay with me. Stay with me.
Yeah, and I was like, dude, I can't. I'm sorry.
Stay with me.
But eventually they got the epidural in, and it felt like the most amazing thing ever in the world. Once the epidural started working, I was able to rest for a bit.
I should have said this before, but we came into the hospital at 8 o'clock. By the time 9 o'clock came, we were in the birthing suite, and the whole process lasted until he was born at 7:12 a.m. I was so out of it. I mean, I was glad that I got to have a little bit of a rest because I felt like I was getting a bit delusional, like standing up that whole time. Every time his heart rate would go down, there'd be like 3 more midwives and 2 more doctors that would come into the room, and they turn on these bright lights, and they go to Taylor and be like, you need to turn this way, you need to turn that way, you need to do this, you need to do that. And they kept on moving these monitors that they had strapped onto her around to different places. I was like super out of it by that point, so it was really good actually when the epidural came, because it allowed me to catch my breath a little bit for the final push when I had to, you know, hold your hand and try and comfort you and stuff when they were getting you to push through the contractions.
At 6, we started pushing because his heart rate had dropped again. I had been pushing for a bit then, and then they came and they moved me forward onto the bed so that, because they had to suction him out with like a little vacuum thingy because he wasn't coming out fast enough and his heart rate was dropping as I was pushing as well. So because his heart rate dropped so many times, they would have to turn me onto one side and push on my side, or back onto my back again, just to like get his heart rate back up. And then they told us that they needed to cut me. I was really glad that I couldn't feel it. He started, I think he attached the vacuum to the baby's head, and they started pulling him out as I was pushing. And then eventually he was like, you can see his head, do you want to touch it? As they were pulling him out. So I looked up, and like you could see the top of his head attached to this little suction cup thingy.
And it looked weird.
Yeah, it was crazy.
It looked crazy.
And I was able to reach out and touch his head.
Mm.
And I think you saw him all come out.
Yeah, I saw him come out. I saw like this head pop out, and he was kind of this green color, like he was doing a Incredible Hulk impersonation. All the stuff came out, and then the rest of him came out, and they lay him down on you like for like 2 to 5 seconds, and they were like, they handed me these scissors and they're like, and now you can cut the umbilical cord. And I'm like, okay, great. So cut the umbilical cord, and then they rush him over to this table and like, oh, it's okay, you know, we're just following procedure. We just have to check his lungs. Like, he's inhaled a lot of meconium, which is the name of the first poop that they do. And so we just need to like work on him a little bit. And so Taylor's like lying on the table with all this blood, looking really sad. And I'm like trying to make sure that he's not going to die. They start to take him up to the nursery. I followed him upstairs to the nursery. He started to actually recover pretty quickly from that point. We're really proud of him because it turns out he's a pretty tough guy. I'm really proud of my baby and also especially my wife for doing such an amazing job at her first birth. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you liked the video. Please subscribe to our channel where we'll be putting out a lot more videos. And please hit the little bell button because that means you'll get a notification every time we put out a video. Thanks everyone, we'll catch you later.